Hello, welcome back. So, today is a recent reads of rereads, the first recent reads of rereads for 2026. There'll be another one at the end of the year, and then I'll also be doing just a regular recent reads with some rereads in it. So, yeah, and so I did my first recent reads of rereads last year. Now that one wasn't fully a recent reads of rereads because there was one book in that recap that I hadn't read before. But this one, this recent reads of rereads is all rereads. So yeah, there's that. And this will also be the only recent reads of rereads with books that I have already reviewed on Goodreads. The rest of the rereads I have not reviewed on Goodreads for this year. Yeah, so there's that. And also for a few of these books there'll be some spoiler sections. Of course, I'll mark it with the timestamps so you can skip those spoilers, but yeah, that's to let you know. So I think that's all for the introduction, so let's get into it. So the first book I reread for this video was The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. So I first read this book in 2021 for school, and so the synopsis, this one's hard to do a synopsis for, so just know that the synopsis I'm about to give doesn't exactly do the story justice in my opinion, so there's that. So this book follows a young girl named Liesel, and she's being sent to this she's being sent to this foster family, well, two foster parents. She's being sent there. It's during World War II. It's unclear in the book why exactly she's being sent away. I mean, we know that her father was being targeted because he was a communist, but it seems like she never knew her father anyways, so yeah, but there's that. So anyways, so she gets sent to live with with Hans and Rosa, and one thing about her that is shown throughout the book, she's a book thief. So she doesn't steal that many books, but she does steal some, and this book is kind of structured around the books that she's had, and also it also follows her relationships with the people in this new town, in this new street. So yeah, again, doesn't do the story justice, but there's that. So one thing I was kind of thinking of and trying, because if you've been around my channel from last year, you know that I tried to read, well, not tried, well, I did read some World War II books last year because I remembered all the World War II books I'd read before I liked, and with the World War II books I read last year, no one got higher than 3 stars. So, and going back to this one, I kind of went, okay, what is it about this one that stands out amongst other World War II books? And the first thing I came up with was the writing is very good. And I guess one thing that kind of goes along with the writing, but also makes this has an aspect that makes this book different, is that this book is narrated by Death. You heard me right. Death. Death personified. That's the narrator of this book. And I remember first hearing about that pretty soon before having to read this book, and I was like nervous because of that, because I'm like, I don't want to like Death as a narrator because then that will kill me. Which I read this book twice now, and I'm still here. So so there's that, and I think Death as a narrator is pretty interesting. Like, there's parts where he describes things as like certain colors. That I think that is very interesting. And also one thing that my copy that I was reading for this time, it had this little bonus content section, which I thought it was going to be like extra stories to go along with it, but it was just the author talking about the process of making this book. And one section I thought was interesting was when he talked about Death as a narrator, and that originally when he tried to write this book with Death as a narrator, it was too dark, or too, this word that I don't know how to pronounce. Yeah, and he said he felt like he had to take a shower after writing a bit of the book. So after that, he scrapped the idea of death as a narrator and then tried to go along with other narrators, but then those weren't working out that well. But then he came up with an idea, which is actually the sentence that ends the book, so I don't think I can say that because that would probably be a spoiler, but like if you read this book, that one sentence at the end, that made the whole thing of death as a narrator work. And I think one thing that that I remember reading that also kind of makes death as a narrator work is there's a part where Death is talking about that people think that war is Death's best friend, and Death was saying that war is more like a demanding boss that you they ask so it asks so much of you, but then when you do it all, they just said do more. So I thought that also makes Death as a narrator work, in my opinion. That he's not all eager to take all these people. So yeah, there's that. So I gave this book 4 stars on my reread, and I think it would have gotten a little bit higher, but there's some content in this book, which we'll get to there. So one content piece I did remember from the first time reading it was the German swears. Particularly, what's often used is the male and female versions of the word pig in German. That is used quite a bit. And then there's also the A word and the S word. Yes, and they also use Jesus. I'm not sure if they also use Christ and God, but they for sure use Jesus as a swear word. So, I mean, at least it's acknowledged in the book that it's blasphemy. So, there's that. But then one content piece that I didn't remember from the first time reading it, there's a later chapter called The Thought of Rudy Naked. You can probably already see where this is going. So yeah, for that chapter, there's reference to genitals, but nothing too graphic in my opinion. And then there's also says later, and for some reason she couldn't stop thinking of that, but not much is talked about on that. So yeah, there's that content piece to keep in mind. So one thing I wanted to talk about, this is going to be the first spoilers section, is the ending of this book. So I'll put timestamp so you can skip to when I'm done talking about this. So, alright, so how this book ends is their street is bombed and many people that Liesel knew dies, but she survives because she was up late writing her book in the basement. But of course, it's very sad, all these people dying. Though this is a sad book, I did not cry either time I read this, so I'm starting to wonder if something's wrong with me. So yeah, there's different things heard about that. Like one of the people I follow was talking about this ending, why did they create all these great characters only to kill them off at the end? And I remember when I first read this for the ending, it felt like the author was it felt to me like the author was like, I don't really know how to end this, so I'm just gonna kill everyone except Liesel. But the but thinking about it now, reading it again, it does seem more purposeful. Like Death says in the beginning, I saw the book thief 3 times, so it makes sense that one of those times there'd be a lot more people dying, and at least one character's death is foreshadowed earlier, so it does seem a bit more purposeful. I guess it could still be argued about if it's necessary or something, but I think it was more well done than I remembered. So yeah. So the next books I read was in a series. So I reread the Status Update series by Laura L. Smith. So this is the only author I know I've read to zero, or at least with fiction read to 0 because she has written a good amount of nonfiction, but I haven't read any of those. But I have read all her fiction books. So, although this book is said to be YA, I would actually classify the series as Christian contemporary new adult. So, with that, I'll explain a bit first what new adult is. So, new adult is a genre for people the ages of 18 to 25, I think. Last I remember checked. It's supposed to be kind of like an in between, a transition genre from young adult to adult. And also in the secular market, it's meant to be kind of more for people who want some spicy content but aren't ready for full on erotica. Not that you should be ready for full on erotica, but you know what I mean. And one thing I've also learned relatively recently is that in the new adult genre, there is an emphasis on trauma. So with this series, though there is no spice, I would still argue that this is new adult because, for one, this series follows college girls, and also, at least in the first 2 books, there is trauma is an important part of the storyline. So for that reason, I would consider this new adult. Like, maybe she didn't intend that, but it did make Christian contemporary new adult. So this series follows 4 girls. We have Claire, Hannah, Palmer, and Kat, and we follow them as they're going to college and navigating all these problems and like how they interact with each other. So yeah. So the first book in that series is It's Complicated. So first of all, I need to rant about this cover for a second. So obviously these are all the 4 girls, but who exactly are these girls? So I think this would be Claire, because Claire is the only one described as being blonde. I guess this would be Palmer, because this is a girl who out of the most one looks most like she could pass for Megan Fox. I guess this would be Kat, because she's the athletic one. But who is this? This is not Hannah. Hannah is described as having auburn hair and freckles. Like, who are you and what did you do with Hannah? Like, so, this book is about 4 girls who they decide they're gonna be college roommates. They're all gonna be roommates at college. And then, so we start the book following the rest of their summer break, and all of them seem to have various problems with boys. And when they get together, they try to all figure that out. So, with this one, it was hard to get into at first because this one, there's like powerful scenes, but not always wrapped in the best writing. Like, in this book and throughout the series, like, there's even like spelling and grammatical errors at times throughout the series. But I love these girls so much, and reading about them, and I think when they're together, that's been like really good. Like, I think I still like the part more like once they actually get to college and we actually see them interact. I still like that more than the previous part of the book. So, now to talk about some of these girls' stories. So first of all, we gotta talk about Palmer. Keegan sucks! And like, I know from reading both times that Keegan is supposed to suck, but oh man, like, dude is an animal. Animal? What? Animal. Like, after reading the first scene of Keegan and Palmer together, I was like, whew, thank God I'm single. And then another girl I want to talk about is Hannah. So I remember reading the first book, and after reading some reviews for this book, I saw that a lot of people were annoyed with Hannah's character because she was like boy crazy and all these things, and like I was kind of a bit offended by those reviews back then because I was like, this is my life. I feel seen for once in a book. But now, but reading it now and being content with my singleness and stuff, I can see how Hannah can be annoying to someone who's not going through what she's going through. So, there's that. Another thing I wanted to touch on that was cool to see in this book is like God working throughout all these things and situations. So yeah, that was cool to see. And one thing I want to correct from my review on Goodreads. Now, this is under the spoiler section, but this is talking about like the first chapter, so that's not really a spoiler. I said in my first review that all of the four girls meet and decide to room together, but that is actually not true. When they first decide that they're all going to be roommates, Palmer was actually not there. It was just Hannah meets Claire, and then they run into Kat, and then because Hannah and Palmer already decided they were going to room together and they just needed other people, so they just found these two other people. So I just wanted to correct that. So for content for this book, so the first piece of content that I really wanted to warn about, and this could also double as a trigger warning, is there is a rape scene in this book. It's not super described and it's not graphic, I would say, but it is somewhat described, and so I wouldn't. I still enjoyed this, but yeah, I just don't know exactly how to caution that, and yeah, and obviously that could be triggering for someone who's been through that. So there's that. There's also, I think, at least twice in this book where there's makeouts that almost lead to more than that, but it doesn't. So yeah, there's that as well. That's all. That's all I have to say for this book. So yeah. Before we move on, one thing I forgot to mention. I don't know why I didn't include this in my notes, but one thing that I like that I wish you could that I wished after the first time reading this that I could have seen more of is Palmer and Claire's friendship. Um, and one thing I noticed that the second time reading this, there are more details about that I didn't catch the first time, so that was nice to see. Okay, and the next book in the series is It's Over. So this book starts up. I'm gonna explain the synopsis of the second book because it doesn't really spoil what happened in the first book. So the first book takes place and starts at a semester break. Although it seems more like for me it seems more like a weekend off than a break. But anyways, so it starts at the break. So all these girls are gone back home, and tragedy strikes for one of the girls, and so she has to deal with that, and the other girls are also still dealing with the things. So yeah. So one thing that was cool was initially when I first read this book, it was the only book that I marked as currently reading, but then when I tried to read, I read this whole review and stuff for this book, but then it wouldn't post on Goodreads. Like it was just marked as read, and it wouldn't even register the star rating. So, yeah. But when I added my reread review to it, and now the whole review is up, so you can read my thoughts from this time and from the previous time. Yes. So there's that. So, and this was the only book that, because originally I gave the first book 3.5 stars and the other two were 3 stars. This was the only book that stayed at a 3-star, although I wouldn't say it's my least favorite in the series because like any book is a chance to read about my girls. So yeah, there's that. And I think this book, again, seeing the relationships between these girls, and I think I like whenever Palmer interacts with any of these girls because like I guess maybe partly because she's more like physically affectionate, which I haven't always wanted or gotten in my friendships. So, and then there was, of course, well, not of course, because you guys don't know, there's that weird part where I thought any hint of any any physical affection shown between two people of the same sex, I'd be like, what's going on? That's gay. But like, I've gotten past that. That of course nowadays some people are unconsciously portraying the idea that like if you get too close, it's gonna turn gay. Like when like I've heard people when they talk about writing stories about a friendship, people assume like, oh, they're gay. Like, okay, but that's a bit of a tangent. And one thing that I didn't get the first time, and I still don't get this second time, was this comment that Hannah said about Palmer being a piece of work. I was like, I still don't get that. Still don't. But I mean, she's obviously not perfect, but like, what's going? What do you want about Hannah? So, and one thing that I realized, which uh, one thing I had forgotten about before picking it up, I think I only remembered it when I read my old review again, was I forgot that I had put this book down for a time because what some of the things talked about, um, it was a conversation, I think it was the conversation that Palmer had with her sister. If you know, you know. So now on to the content. So I guess it's kind of like the same thing from the previous book of like a makeout almost leading to more but doesn't. So there's that again. And then there's one comment later in the book about a guy being described as delicious in the context of sex. So but obviously we don't get any details of that on page. It's just that comment. And then the one piece of content. Now this is going to be a spoiler, so put another timestamp here. So it's a spoiler, but it's an important content note, so you could skip right now. Okay, so the tragedy in this book is that Kat's brother Alex dies in a car accident. So there's that, and then so yeah, there's that. So then the good way into the book, like towards the end, there's this moment where Kat is in Barcelona and she communicates with Alex. Like Alex shows up to her and he seems real, like she can like touch him and stuff. And he tells her that, oh, I'm okay. It didn't hurt. I'm in heaven now. And like all these things. And like that's a little questionable to me because the Bible warns us not to be communicating with the dead. And of course, Kat didn't seek that out, but it's still questionable. And one thing, again, I'm reading my old review, I had a problem with this scene the first time I read it as well. And this is what I wrote about it. And of course, you can read the full context in my review. Although one problem I have with Kat's story is when she's in Barcelona and she sees Alex and he tells her that he's in heaven and all that stuff. I'm just worried that this will sway young women towards trusting supernatural experiences more than scripture. I don't know if that's Laura L. Smith's intention, but it's still concerning, which that's a good point that I didn't even consider the second time around that this would this yeah, again, trusting more in supernatural experiences than scripture. So yeah, there's that. And the third book in this series is It's Addicting. Now, I'm not going to say what this book is about, and even the back cover for this book is very vague, so I won't say what's going on. So, I thought this the first time reading this book, but I'm even more convinced of it the second time around. I really think there should have been another book in between It's Addicting and It's Over. Because and not just because I want to read more of these girls, although I do want that, but no, narratively it makes more sense that there should have been another book because there are major things in this book that either don't have any build up from the previous books or not enough build up. Like, who is Nate? We did not see him at all in the previous books. And then Kat's all of a sudden in a relationship now, which again there was some build up to that, but again, not enough. So, yes. But otherwise, I still really enjoyed this book. I liked more of seeing Claire and Palmer's friendship because I remember this book having the most of that. And one thing that was cool to see, I think more so towards the end of this book, is that while the relationship is precious to see, I feel like most of it has been like Palmer has been giving more to Claire. But then in this book, towards the end, we kind of see more Claire. How do I word this? Claire is more expressing concern for Palmer and like showing that she cares as well. So that was really sweet to see. And then one thing I wish that I had seen more of is Claire and Kat's friendship, although I can't really say why without giving spoilers for the other books. So yeah, there's that. And then one thing, this isn't really a content note, but one thing I feel like I should mention, there is a brief mention of socialism, not giving any opinion on it, like if it's good or bad, just it being mentioned, which that might not bother some, but I think some might be annoyed that that was even mentioned at all. So there's that. So for content for this one, there is some descriptive kisses, which I didn't note that in my other reviews, but I think it could be said that that was the case for the other reviews, but I guess note mainly for this one. And then there's also some drinking content in this book, and there's also one scene towards the end where a girl ends up on someone's couch after having drank and she isn't sure what happened. And it's never confirmed what did happen, but just there to know. So yeah, that was last book in the series. So sad that the series is over. Yeah. I even messaged the author and like asked her if she's gonna write fiction in the future, especially since I've loved this series so much. And she said she was kind of just like, well, we'll see, but yeah. So, and the last book I reread for this video is Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli, of course. So, this book follows. Well, I guess I should say. So, I first read this book in 2024. Again, the only one I have reviewed on my channel before. Or I guess I could say with the other books I have mentioned them at least once before on my channel, but this is the one that I read for this channel. So anyways, so this book follows Leo. He goes to this high school in Arizona, and everyone there is kind of the same. They kind of all have the same vibe. They do the same things and all this stuff. And then one day, Stargirl joins this school, and she is clearly very different. She wears long dresses, she has a ukulele and a pet rat, and she seems to know things about a lot of the students there, and she acts very differently, like she does things no one else would do. And at first, it sparks a positive change in the school with other kids starting to branch out and be more different. But then she does something that the rest of the school deems unforgivable. Although around that time, her and Leo develop a bit of a romance, and Leo's torn between wanting to stick with her and wanting to be accepted by everyone else. So, yeah. So this book, I kind of wonder if I was just in a weird funk after rereading the status update series, or like I don't know if I guess you could call it a slump, or I've also heard the term book hangover, but when a book is so good that when you try to read something else you can't get into it as much, because when I was reading it and rereading this I was like, why am I not liking this as much as I read it the first time? Like, I mean, of course it's still good, but like this is feeling more like a 4-star when before it was a 4.5. So there's that. And so I think it was just unnecessary for me to read this book again, like, because I already annotated it from the first time, although it was kind of fun seeing some of my annotations, because for some of them I also wrote things in the margin, so it was cool to see that. But yeah, I kind of wish I'd hold on to the 4.5-ness from the first time reading this instead of trying to read it again. So, but still, this is still a good book, still a good story, still good writing, all the things. So, yeah. But then one thing I didn't do the first time I reviewed this was give some content for this book. So, this book, I think it's kind of middle grade YA. It's pretty good for content. I think the only things to note is that there's mentions of makeouts, and then there's one kiss that it's not described, but it is said that the person said, "Oh, the person kissing me was no saint." So I guess do with that what you will. And then there's no language, but there are words like crap and friggin' used. So there's that. So yeah. So that is all for this video. And again, to end this video, there'll be another dance video that I hope to release in conjunction with this. Now, don't worry, if you saw my last video, you might think, oh, after this is like, oh, is she gonna do this in every video? No, I'm not gonna release a dance video in conjunction with every video, but I want to do one with this one, dance to the song. It relates mostly to the status updates series and that, so, but that is all. Goodbye!